As you all know from thinking about the questions for your informal essay, W.B. Yeats is rather an old-fashioned poet. Today we're going to read a poem together to think about how his old-fashioned notions fit with the modern world he's living in. This talk will help us understand why North says we need to think about modernisms rather than modernism, and it will also give us some practice in that very useful skill, reading a poem. Let's look at Yeats's beautiful poem, The Wild Swans That Cool. Anytime you're reading a poem, look at the title first. It gives you some idea of what the poem is about. This title tells us the poem is in the tradition of nature poetry, and all nature poetry after Wordsworth and Coleridge reminds us of them, and of the other Romantic poets. So we already know that Yeats is thinking about the Romantics a bit, as all modern writers do, before we are even in the poem. Cool is a strange word, one that most of us probably haven't seen before. The at tells us it's a proper noun, a place name. If we knew a little about Yeats, or had access to Google, we would know that this is Cool Park, the home of Irish literary patron Lady Augusta Gregory, Yeats's friend. That gives us some ideas to be going on with. Next, we want to read the poem. Out loud is best. Poems are meant to sound. It's not just the rhyme and meter, but everything about a poem considers how it will be aloud. So if we really want to know what the poet is up to, we read aloud too. Here we go. The trees are in their autumn beauty. The woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water, among the stones, are 59 swans. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw, before I had well finished, all suddenly mount and scatter, wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. I have looked upon those brilliant creatures, and now my heart is sore. All's changed since I, hearing at twilight the first time on this shore the bell-beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams, or climb the air. Their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest, wander where they will, attend upon them still. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious, beautiful. Among what rushes will they build? By what lake's edge or pool delight men's eyes when I awake some day to find they have flown away? Now, what do we feel after reading this poem? What is the overall feeling we get? This is where we ask whether we feel happy or sad, and then try to refine that, triumphant, despairing, or whatever the poem might make us feel. I think this poem is sad, but in a particular way, an elegiac way, like the poet is mourning something. It's a poem about loss. That's a good first take to guide us as we think through the poem. The next step will be to think about why we came up with that take. What's in the poem to make us feel that way? Looking back, I can see that the speaker of the poem is going to a familiar place, and noticing not that it has changed, but that he has. When he says something like, their hearts have not grown old, he might as well add, like mine has. When he describes the swans as lover by lover, he means that they're all paired up, but he's alone. Lucky swans. And when he gets to the end of the poem and wonders where they're going to be next, he means that he expects them to fly away while he is left behind, gazing at the empty waters, and presumably feeling the full weight of his empty heart. Well, poor guy. I said before that the title makes us think of Romantic poems, which are often about nature, but in perhaps a more uplifting way than this poem is. The standard Romantic poem would say something like, I was depressed, and then I saw some beautiful natural sight, and I felt much better. That's more or less the theme of countless Wordsworth poems, for instance, like Wordsworth's I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, or his Tintern Abbey. You'll see some of that spirit in Coleridge's Frost at Midnight, which you'll be reading as part of the Yeats unit. Yeats instead seems to be saying something like, I was okay until I saw how beautiful nature is. Now, why would that be, I wonder? Actually, that's a great thing to wonder about. He's invoking a poetic tradition and then standing it on its head. This is a very modernist thing to do. Remember, the moderns felt that something had changed in their world, cutting them off from the past. Part of what this meant for them was that the traditions and conventions of the past wouldn't work any longer to express the world as they found it. But at the same time, if you don't use conventions and traditions, no one can understand you. Virginia Woolf compares conventions to polite discourse at parties. If all the talk you have is small talk, you'll never say anything important. But without the little politenesses, such as asking how someone is, or even maybe talking about the weather, communication becomes so difficult that it doesn't really happen. So many modernist artists make a choice that's similar to Yeats's here in this poem. They use the conventions, but they turn them askew somehow. When they do, that's always a sign that here is something worth prying into. So let's pry here. Yeats is sad because nature isn't reviving him, but rather reminding him of his aging and isolation. Stupid swans, always going about 2 by 2. I mean, he's been counting them every year for 19 years. Kind of weird how specific that is. It's not 20, which would make more sense. After all, it's not like he wants to draw attention to the number or anything. Or, wait, could it be that he's signaling us again? How many swans were there? 9 and 50? Oh dear. The speaker of this poem can't possibly be right that all the swans are paired up if there are 59 of them. My elementary math says that you can't divide 59 by 2 and get a whole number. See how that worked? Yeats has a speaker, a persona, who is walking around all sad sack, feeling sorry for himself. But Yeats, as a poet, makes sure that we see his speaker is projecting a lot of things on the natural world, that the natural world is not supplying itself. The swans can't be lover by lover. The speaker is engaging in a powerful act of imagination to make what he sees, what his consciousness wants to see. There's some influence of the unconscious here too, obviously. Maybe the swans remind him of a lost lover, though probably not because they're so unfairly paired up. That should make us doubt some of the speaker's other statements too. And sure enough, right there where he says that the swans' hearts have not grown old, we might have another opportunity to question him. He says he's been coming here for 19 years, a curiously specific number. In all that time, only the speaker has aged? I don't think so. These are the grandchildren, maybe the great-grandchildren of the swans he saw 19 years ago. They haven't aged only because they've been dying. He can't tell they're going through the same life process as he is, only because he can't tell the difference between the swans. I don't really believe any part of the speaker's characterization of what he sees now. Instead, it seems the whole poem is a projection from inside himself, with the elements of the natural world only being the paint he uses on the canvas of his own psyche. I want to add lines now. When I awake someday to find they have flown away, like some other people I could mention. All of this is very, very modern, even if Yeats himself is a reluctant modernist. For him, the break with the past is bad. You can see in this poem that things used to be good, but now they're rotten. He used to be young like the swans, and he used to be paired like the swans, and everyone used to stay where they were supposed to be, like wild swans won't, and in every possible way, this is the most nostalgic poem you can imagine. Nostalgia isn't just looking at the past, remember. It's looking at the past in a very special way, through rose-colored glasses. So the nostalgic 1950s is Buddy Holly and Ozzie and Harriet, not Jim Crow and lynching. Sock hops, not conformity and red baiting. Yeats registers the break with the past by yearning for the good old days, now lost forever. You'll see that in many of his poems, the idea that things used to be so great, and now they're so rotten. Nostalgia, in other words, is a very modern phenomenon, and Yeats, smarter than his speaker, understands that. He's written a self-deconstructing poem, a poem that contains within it the tools we need to question the version of the poem that appears on first reading. In other words, though the poem appears to be an elegy, it's actually a great example of modernist irony.